afternoon, everyone. I should say almost good evening because it's getting a little bit later in the day. Colin Taylor is alongside with me. I am Mike Yuba, and this is an emergency show today because of the news, obviously, that happened a little bit earlier with Frank Martin. And as you can tell, we are just wearing hooded sweatshirts. I mean, we're just running around trying to keep up with everything. So we're going to let people kind of file on in for a little bit for the first couple minutes. So we'll kind of just dance around to let people kind of come in for a second. But obviously a lot going on in the world of South Carolina basketball. We can look back to obviously last week of what took place at the SEC tournament. We can go back to what took place last night, not being able to get that NIT invitation. And you just had a feeling that over the course of the next 24 to 48 hours, that if something were to happen, that it was likely to happen during that time period. And of course, that is the case on this Monday afternoon as we get ready to head into the evening to begin this work week. And Colin, I'll begin with that. You know, this news with Frank Martin. I mean, you and I, we went down to Tampa. We covered the SEC men's tournament. And I know driving back, it was one of those things that the rumbles, as you alluded to, you started to hear that if you had to try to divide it from a 50-50%, it was starting to weigh a little bit more, lean a little bit more to the possibility of Frank not being retained. And of course, that is the case as we sit here on Monday.
Yeah, and ultimately it was losing by 22 points to Mississippi State. In that SEC tournament, they win one game there. They beat Mississippi State, and you're more than likely going to the NIT, and you get to the NIT, and who knows what happens after that. If you win a game, if you win two games, if you go all the way to New York for the NIT Final Four, you just don't know what happens. So it certainly felt like the end after that SEC tournament loss, and the future essentially got sealed, not making the NIT. And, at this point, South Carolina, if it was going to make a change, needed to do it sooner rather than later, and just to be able to have its pick of the pool, not let any other coaches kind of get away or interview your top candidate. So it makes sense to do it now. And it sucks for Frank, who took the program to quite literally the highest high it's ever been, and just couldn't officially capitalize on that going forward.
So you and I were talking about before we hopped on, because I think it's going to be one of those questions that people are going to have going into not just the next couple hours, but it's going to be something that's going to be lingering until we have an opportunity to hear from Athletic Director Ray Tanner and some of the administration at the University of South Carolina. How much do you believe not being able to make the NIT played a factor in this? If South Carolina is in the NIT as of today, do you still feel like they would move on from Frank, or is it one of those things you'd have to kind of wait and see what would have took place during the NIT?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's TBD on what that looks like. I mean, you make the NIT and you go on a run, and during the run you get a commitment from GG Jackson, who announces he's going to reclassify, and who knows? I mean, you could very well be sitting here with Frank Martin still your coach and GG Jackson essentially coming. So who knows? I mean, that's a lot of what ifs, and we're not in the what if game, but certainly if they made the NIT, I think the chances of him sticking around are a little bit better, especially if during that NIT run you get a commitment from a guy like GG Jackson, who announces he's going to come and reclassify.
So, I mean, I know it's not necessarily the biggest thing to worry about right now, but I mean, it's not saying that it's not important. Does this kind of end any hopes for South Carolina to be able to get GG Jackson? Because obviously we know the connection that GG had with Frank, the connection that the family had, and how much they cared about Frank. Is there even a slither of hope that USC could still land GG?
I think if there is hope, it's slim and none. I think that the way things sit right now, you're probably looking at GG exploring other options. I can't see it right now as we sit here on March, whatever day it is. All these days have been blended together since forever, but I can't see it happening right now.
No, and I think we're on the same page with that. It was something that we've seen on Gamecock Central, though, that is there a chance? Well, it's like, look, you know what you were going to get yourself into if you moved on from Frank right now. But I will give South Carolina credit. They could have waited. they could have waited until we got to April 1st. And if they had waited till April 1st, what would have happened is Frank's buyout would have dropped down just a little bit. On top of that, though, you would have potentially had put yourself in a situation that maybe GG commits. But I think that would have been honestly just there's no other way to put it. It would have been just a very unclassy move if South Carolina knew at that point. Not saying that they've known, but if they knew that they were going to move on from him regardless and just wait until April 1st, not the best look afterwards if a kid commits. But I will say this, though. Making this move, and it goes back to your point, Colin, making this move shows the commitment they have to being able to get the program headed in the right direction, or at least being able to put it on a direction that they feel like will be the right direction sooner rather than later. Because if you do wait until April 1st to have that buyout drop down just a little bit, you're going to be wasting time, and losing that time could be making the difference of, hiring this guy over that guy. We've seen what's gone on in the SEC over these last couple of days with the number of head coaching changes that have took place. So South Carolina is right in that mix. I believe, 5 coaches now? 5 coaching changes? I mean, I'm trying to keep up. It's been a lot.
Georgia, I'm trying to get my hand. Georgia, Florida. Georgia opened, hired Florida's coach. Missouri's open. Mississippi State more than likely is going to open, and now South Carolina and LSU. So, I mean, you could have potentially half of the SEC open at any given point.
And does that? I mean, look. Bottom line is this: we can sit here, we could talk about the what ifs, and create popsicle headache scenarios. Bottom line is Frank's no longer the head coach at South Carolina. Does that surprise you at all? That you maybe look at the structure of the SEC, that so many coaches are going to be flipped over, right? I mean, turnover going on, new coaches. Do you think that's something that South Carolina looked at and said, all right, we got to be able to keep up with the Joneses, knowing that if we don't do this, we could put ourselves a year behind if things do not work out with Frank next year? I mean, do you think that played any factor into it?
I certainly do. Listen, the SEC's – this is not the SEC from a decade ago or the SEC from 7 years ago. This is a really good SEC, and it's one of those where if you're standing still, you're going to get passed, and you need to be growing. And if South Carolina felt that there needed to be change, which obviously they did, given the fact that they moved on from Frank Martin today, you need to be able to go out and get quality head coaches. And, you're going to be competing with Missouri. You're going to be competing with Mississippi State potentially for guys on the carousel, and you need to be able to get a jump start and make your opening available and have the opportunity. You don't need to go in there with a shallow pool. You want to be able to jump into the deep end and interview your top candidates whenever you want to have your top candidates out there. So that's why I think they made the move now, and now they're going to be competing against, like I said, the Missouris and the Mississippi States of the world, potentially the Floridas of the world for candidates. And it's going to be up to selling salary. It's going to be up to selling potential and what you can do with South Carolina, along with the facilities and the buy-in from the administration.
Colin, looking at some of the comments that we're getting, and you could be watching this from Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, wherever you're watching it. If you're on the Gamecock Central Insider Forum, we have that link up there as well. Be able to weigh in if you don't want to publicly share to the rest of the world, but you just want to share to your Gamecock Central friends, if you want to call it that. Friends, yeah. I'm just looking at – I'm trying to make sure I get the name up here because I want to make sure we give shout-outs to the people who send messages in, but I think one of them, here it is, Phil. When do you suspect they'll have some idea about a timetable? I mean, we hear these things all the time. This isn't any disrespect towards Ray Tanner or any administrator that goes through this process, but we always hear, all right, it's a national search. It's going to begin immediately, which I'm sure this has been going on behind the scenes. Probably when you have something like this, it's one of those things that you have an idea of that it could get to that point and you're ready for. But where I'm going with this is, how quickly do you think this search will go? And I know you, Colin, you posted on the Gamecock Central website today some of the candidates that potentially South Carolina could look at. I know you and I, we've had some private conversations about some other guys that USC have been having conversations with that we'll provide information to in the coming days. So there's a lot of moving pieces right now. It's still
Yep.
very fluid. Um, do you have any idea of a timetable on this?
I mean, with any coaching search, sooner rather than later, just to keep recruiting classes intact. I think South Carolina actually has a pretty solid recruiting class right now. So that roster management, you're going to have defections because of this. I feel like that's just human nature. Um, so that's the issue right now. So I think sooner rather than later, you'd like to have an answer. But some of these guys that they're going after are in the NCAA tournament. Some of these guys are coaching in postseason basketball. So we might not have an answer until after the first weekend of tournament games, depending on how those go. We might not have, depends on who the top candidates are, because some are in the NCAA tournament, some aren't. But I think you're going to have a clearer picture, especially after this weekend, of what that timeline looks like and what it could potentially turn into. But I anticipate this getting sooner rather than later for South Carolina. And it's weird because the last two football coaching searches were done in the middle of the season. So we've had like 6 weeks of football coaching searches. The baseball one dragged into, I think, July, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't think it's going to be as long as that one. But I think it'll be a few days as the NCAA tournament continues on and teams win and lose there.
I'm trying to see one of the comments that was sent in about trying to find someone that's like Shane Beamer. Look, in a perfect world, I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, every team in the country, I don't care what sport it is, could be football, basketball, baseball, tiddlywinks. It doesn't matter what it is. You want to be able to find someone. And obviously time will tell with Shane Beamer. But what I mean by that is what he's been able to do just in 1 year, being able to get a team to 7 wins after only having 6 wins in their previous 2 seasons combined. But as far as basketball goes, it's just different, Colin. And it's just so different. I think we can all sit here and be like, all right, what does the ideal coach look like for South Carolina? I think a lot of us would say, all right, young, energetic, can recruit well. I mean, shoot, you could say that for any coach, right? I mean, so I say that, and that's obviously things that anyone would say. Is there anything in your mind that South Carolina needs to find in this next coach to be able to take them to that next level that this university and this fan base desperately want to climb to?
I mean, recruiter. At the end of the day, you need a guy that the issue with South Carolina has never been. Frank Martin was a fantastic tactical coach. I don't think anyone can dispute that. He was a really good tactical coach. The issue is from top to bottom, he just didn't have NCAA tournament rosters. And you look at some of the people that he brought in or that transferred out, or the guys he missed on that are playing in the NCAA tournament. I mean, Zion Williamson was a long shot to begin with, but obviously he is what he is. You didn't land a commitment from John Morant, and he went to Murray State, went to the tournament. I mean, then you look at Josiah James, a guy you could have easily gotten in the NCAA tournament with Tennessee. Devontae Shuler went to the tournament with Ole Miss. Juwan Gary at Alabama is in the NCAA tournament for the second straight year. So you need to find a coach that's able to get those talented in-state guys to stay in state and play at South Carolina. And they've had tournament quality players come through there, and they've landed, a few. Trey Hannibal, who transferred out to Murray State, is going to the tournament this year. Justin Minaya transferred out, going with Providence. So keeping those guys in state is going to be big, and you need someone that's going to be able to do that and pair that with able to recruit the transfer portal, understanding the new wave of college basketball and what it is with NIL, with everything else that goes into it. And someone who's young and energetic, someone that can market the program, just like Shane Beamer's done. So that's what you need. And I think that Ray Tanner and Chance Miller and the rest of the administration know that. And I think they're going to go out there and try to find someone who fits that bill.
And when you look at what Frank was able to accomplish here, I mean, the Final Four alone, I mean, we know it's well documented, right? What he was able to accomplish. He was able to do things that no other Gamecock basketball coach had ever done here from a men's standpoint. It stinks. It stinks that they weren't able to propel it into something more from that Final Four. And what I mean by that is talking about tournament appearances. They were able to get some wins. They were able to finish pretty high up in the SEC standings for a period of time after that. But then, of course, things kind of fizzled out. And, it stinks that he wasn't able to take that next step because, I mean, we saw it with Muschamp to an extent. But, I mean, anyone that wants to make a comparison to Will, and this isn't a shot at Will, but anyone that wants to make a comparison to Muschamp to Frank, I mean, come on, really? I mean, at least Frank made a Final Four.
Yeah, Frank made the postseason. That's not. I mean, should have made it twice.
Yeah. So, but where I'm going with this, Colin, is what it's shown is that South Carolina is capable of doing great things here. The problem is once you give the fan base, once you give the boosters, the administration, this city a taste of that, they're going to want more of it. So my question to you is, you have a new coach come in here. And look, it might take some time. It usually does, especially with basketball. It usually takes some time. Where should be the expectations, regardless of whoever South Carolina hires? And how long do you give that person? And I know it's crazy to say because they don't even have a head coach right now. But I think that is where we're at right now, is because this is such a challenging location to be for basketball. Because while you do have the history with some of the big name guys, right? The Alex Englishes of the world, you could go down the list, so much talent. The winning just has not been there historically. Yeah. So what can you do to be able to take it to that next level and be able to show, hey, look, Frank Martin was able to prove that you can be able to do great things here. But we want to be able to get back to a level that's at least consistent, even if it's not necessarily a Final Four year. It's just being able to make the tournament a little bit more frequently.
Yeah, I think more frequent tournament trips. South Carolina historically, I think, averages 1 in 9 tournament trips in its program. 1 every 9 years. You should aspire to more. I think you need to leverage the transfer portal because that allows you to kind of shorten your get good time. This wasn't like it was when Frank first got here, like that. Where you had to wait and guys had to sit out a year, or you're wasting scholarships on a guy that you have to watch, won't play immediately. You need to be able to leverage the transfer portal. And you look at outside of the 1970s, the two best teams in South Carolina history, your 2017 on a 4-year and your 1997 SEC title year were built on the backs of players who grew up in South Carolina, your Melvin Watsons, your Larry Davises, your BJ Mackeys, and then your Sindarius, PJ Dozier, Justin Mackeys of the world. The foundation was laid by in-state guys. And I think that's what needs to happen. You need to keep some of this elite talent in state, which you have not done over the last half decade. You did it early in Frank Martin's tenure, getting a guy like Sindarius, getting a guy like Justin Mackey, getting a guy like obviously PJ Dozier. But you haven't done it as frequently as you've needed to. You have a few guys on that roster right now. James Reese, who just left, his eligibility is over. Jacoby Wright's an in-state guy, but you just need to recruit the state better at the end of the day. And it's not like they haven't tried. They just haven't had the success to do it, on paper. So you need to be able to go out and get those guys. And that's what's next for this coach is you have a few in the 23 and 24 classes that are elite level players. Can you go get them? And it's going to be harder because Frank Martin and this staff put in a lot of work to do it, and they really like this upcoming staff, and now you got to win them over again with a new one.
And Colin, I know you and we've had conversations off camera about some of the things that have maybe held South Carolina back. We could put the coaching to the side for a second. Regardless of whoever comes in to be the next coach, what can this university do, in your opinion, from an administration standpoint and just from being able to give their added resources to be able to help this team to be able to take them to that next level?
Money. Invest more money into it. I think South Carolina is ranked near the bottom in the SEC in terms of spending on men's basketball. It's just not going to cut it with a program that's historically not made the tournament at a consistent basis. You need to put more money into it. You need to put forth the resources, a practice facility that's not in a hollowed out arena. You need to make it so attractive for coaches to come. And that's what football did. Football made it incredibly attractive with the new ops building, with the renovations to Williams-Brice, with the indoor facility for recruits and for potential coaches, not only head coaches, but assistants to come and want to work at South Carolina. And I think you have to do that if you're South Carolina's administration moving forward from a financial standpoint, a commitment and wholesale commitment truly to the men's basketball program, both in thought process and in financial, putting forth the money for it.
If you're just joining us, we appreciate you. Wherever you're watching, whether it be Facebook, whether it be YouTube, Twitter, wherever you're watching today's live stream, as Colin Taylor and I are doing an emergency show, obviously with the news about Frank Martin being let go by South Carolina today. So if you're just ending your workday, you're joining us. We're just kind of rehashing what happened. Where does South Carolina go from here? So if you have any thoughts, join in wherever you're listening in the comment section, and we'll be able to get to you. There's one thing I did bring up, Colin, and I thought it was an interesting take by Craig, saying, this is the one. I actually pulled it up right here. It should take less time in hoops with the portal, and it only takes 2 to 4 really good players to turn around. Craig, I don't disagree with you, but I think on the flip side of that, it can also be used against you. And this is something that every team is going through. But where I'm going with that is that you have to be able to get players that want to play here, number one, and feel comfortable playing here. It could be a challenging part depending on who you get here as the next head coach, to be able to get guys to say, I want to come to South Carolina. Let's pick on Gigi for a little bit. You have a guy that's a local guy. He was looking at potentially playing here. That's not to say he would have come here, but he was potentially going to be coming to South Carolina if Frank Martin had stayed. Those chances of landing Gigi have decreased, since exponentially. And I'm not going to say it's gone altogether. I think we all assume that, South Carolina landing Gigi is very, very unlikely to happen. But hey, crazier things have happened, and you never know who the next head coach could be. But I say that because it's challenging knowing that you have guys on this roster, and it happens with basketball programs even before the transfer portal. You have guys on this roster that might just decide to split. And at that point, you literally need to build a roster from scratch. And that can be difficult because now you're bringing in guys who maybe they're upperclassmen, but, maybe these guys just aren't that great of players, and you just need to be able to get bodies out there, and you're not able to build that culture. So I think the transfer portal, no question, it can help things. You look at it from a football standpoint, but it's just so different with basketball. It really is. Yes, it could just take 1 or 2 guys to be able to bring them in here, and it can change your culture. Absolutely. But it all depends, number one, who that next head coach is, and number 2, what players you have here. How many seniors stick around? Does a guy like Jermaine Kuznar, does a guy like Eric Stevenson, do they decide to stay? Because they have that option to. Do they decide to come back, or do they go elsewhere? Or do they decide just to, hey, this is it for me for basketball? Those are the questions that we're going to have to find out in the next couple weeks, if not months. So I think with the transfer portal, yes, absolutely. Take advantage of it. You can find a diamond in the rough. I know James Reese, he struggled with that final game of his career in the SEC tournament, but look what he was able to do the last couple months. He was able to catch on fire. And those are the type of guys that you need to be able to get here and then be able to grow from it, be able to take it to the next level. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Colin.
Yeah, let's be honest here. If you're South Carolina, a lot of these guys, your Devin Carters, your Eric Stevensons, your Jermaine Kuznards, your Keyshawn Bryants, who all had the chance to come back next year if they wanted to, came to South Carolina or came back because of their belief in Frank Martin and with him not there, I think that puts into question there if they're going to be on South Carolina's roster next year. I'm not saying they're definitely leaving. I'm not saying they're definitely coming back, but a lot of these guys are not only loyal to Frank in this staff, but they're, they wanted to play at South Carolina because of them. So I think you'll see some defections. I think that's anticipated in every coaching change. And so if you're whoever the next head coach is going to be, you need to be able to leverage and make South Carolina an attractive landing spot for high-level transfers. Shane Beamer is someone who has done that on the football side of things. It's a completely different beast in college basketball. But you need to go and make this an attractive landing spot for not only elite-level high school talent, but elite-level transfers as well to be able to compete with. Auburn's not slowing down. Texas A&M had a really good end of its year. Kentucky's not slowing down. Arkansas the same way, same with Alabama. So you're going to need to compete with the big boys currently in the SEC. Tennessee's not slowing down either. So to compete with them, you're going to need to be able to bring in high-level talent and coach them up and develop them and find ways to put things together.
So, Colin, I do want to ask you this, though, because I've seen a couple people, and I don't want to go through every freaking name. Like, all right, how about this guy? How about that guy? If you want to be able to play that game, go over to Gamecock Central. Colin does a great job breaking it down. But we can do this for so many coaches. It's not even worth getting into every single guy. What about this guy? But there are a couple names, though, that I do want to point out that I have seen in the comments section. I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer. I understand he has a history of South Carolina. Both these guys do that I'm going to mention. But the first one that I'm going to mention is Mike Boynton. Colin, I can't see it happening, especially right now. Main reason being he's in a great situation right now at Oklahoma State. Great situation. They're paying him well. Yes, they're going through some sanctions right now at the NCAA, and it's keeping them out of the NCAA tournament. But you know what? Those are going to go away at some point. He'll be able to play in the tournament again. It makes zero sense when you look at the situation, when you look at the pay, and you look at the job security. Yes, he's an alum. Well, he wants to coach South Carolina. I'm not saying he doesn't, but it's a timing thing too. Why would you leave a situation that you're in right now for something that there's so many question marks around? Do I feel like that means Boynton doesn't end up coaching at South Carolina one day? No. I mean, I just don't think the timing right now, it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that you would have had a better shot at Boynton last year if you opted to make a change. Dude just signed a massive extension at Oklahoma State. You would owe him if you went after him and ultimately hired him to pay a massive buyout along with what you were going to have to pay him anyway. Jeans today. It's a jeans day today.
Getting ridiculed for what you're wearing today.
I know, right?
On Twitter today. We'll have to talk about that later.
But Boynton just signed an extension. Oklahoma State just got through with all their punishments essentially for the FBI case. It would make no sense from a career move after this year to come. Not saying he won't, you never know, but I can't see it happening just given, where his program is right now, just getting through the NCAA postseason ban season, I believe this was, and his extensions just from a money standpoint and from a timing standpoint, I think you'd have had a better shot last year versus this offseason.
And the next name that we're going to continue to hear, like I said, I'm not going to go through every single person that we're seeing for names, and that's no disrespect. We appreciate everyone that's commenting in, but we could do this with so many names. It's just, what about this guy? What about that guy? But I will point out BJ Mackey, because that is a guy that obviously has this very, very, very special place in the hearts of Gamecock fans, and what he was able to accomplish during his time here and being part of that SEC championship team. And then obviously what his son was able to do as well, part of that Final Four team. Do you see that happening right now? Or is that at least a call that you make right now?
I mean, sure. I think it's a call you can make. I think I'm pretty sure it's safe to say that there are other guys higher up the list more than likely I don't know that for certain at this point. It's still really in the infancy of this search. I think he would listen. I don't doubt that one bit. Someone that loves Columbia, someone that's from Irmo, has recruited South Carolina at a pretty high rate. He's been recruiting South Carolina for a while, so never say never. But I mean, he's in a solid position as an assistant, and they're doing really good things at Wake Forest with him and Shea, and obviously Forbes is the head coach. But I'm not sure on BJ's validity as from a South Carolina's perspective right now, but I think he would absolutely listen if South Carolina were to make that call.
All right, let's take a step back for a minute, talking about the future of the program and the what ifs and who do you go after. Let's take a step back and talk about Frank. I know some people might be like, all right, well, he's no longer the coach. He's no longer the coach. I get that. But, then again, I mean, this guy is always going to be in the record books for South Carolina, whether you like the man or not. And I think a lot of people like Frank as a person and what he was able to accomplish. I mean, I posted on the Insider Forum today on Gamecock Central, shared on Twitter as well, that passionate post-game press conference after losing in the Final Four. I mean, I think that's one that a lot of people, Gamecock fans and just people that follow college basketball, will remember for a long time. I mean, that's the Frank that I'm going to remember. But I say that because when you look at what Frank has been able to accomplish at South Carolina, despite maybe just the last couple of years, and I always put the COVID year to the side because it's so tough to be able to get any true idea of how good that team really was going to be, especially when you don't have the whole month of December to practice. What's next for Frank? I mean, here's a guy that has been able to have success at Kansas State. He was able to take a program like South Carolina to the Final Four. What's next for him? I see in the comment section, I think there was one person that said, could you see Frank going to the SEC network? Well, I mean, look, maybe if he wanted to sit out a year and be able to say, all right, let's just gather myself, and I'm going to be making about, I think, just over $3 million now with this buyout for this next season. Let's just relax with my wife, Anya, my children. I could see that happening, and maybe doing something for the SEC network. But deep down, Frank doesn't want to do that. Frank's heart is on the sideline. I mean, there's a reason why one of his best buds, Andy Kennedy, who was also an SEC network analyst for a while, is back on the sidelines. Guys like that, they just miss it too much. They miss the grind. They miss the recruiting aspect. They miss watching film. They miss practicing. That's how at least I feel about it, Colin. I don't know how you feel about it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't see Frank, if he does do media, I can't see him doing it for more than a year. I know his youngest kids are nearing the age of finishing up high school, I believe, if that's correct. I can't see it for more than a really long time. I think he ends up getting another head coaching gig. I don't gut feel right now says it's not in the SEC, but I could see him getting another mid-major to high-major job in college basketball and doing really well there, because I think he did some good things at South Carolina. It was not perfect by any stretch of any imagination, but he did do some good things, and they had some success in the SEC. They had some trip-ups in the non-con, and they also went to a Final Four. So there was some good, and I think you can make the argument Frank's one of the two best coaches in program history. From a win standpoint, and I think history will remember Frank Martin a little bit kinder than how a lot of people are remembering him today on March 14th.
How long do you give it? Because the situation's obviously much different than a guy like Steve Spurrier, right? In terms of how that ended at the University of South Carolina. But I feel like seeing the head ball coach back around, and I know I don't speak for every Gamecock fan. I'm sure there's some Gamecock fans that still are upset with him, and I understand that. But it just felt like when he was back in the arena, I'd say maybe a month ago or so, when he presented Shane Beamer at halftime the first-year Coach of the Year award, there was a decent reception. There were some boos, but then you also got to remember you had some other. I think it was Kentucky was it Kentucky that night? Yeah, Kentucky fans in the building. So I'm sure there's a lot of Kentucky fans that are still upset, whether it be as his days as a Florida Gator, a coach at Florida, or obviously being a coach at South Carolina. how long do you think it will take for the people that are just mad at Frank for that to wear out? Is it until the next guy gets here? Until I mean, because we see, and it's not the exact same. We see how people handle Will Muschamp still to this day, and like I said, not the same situation, not the same story. Both guys didn't accomplish the same. But we still see to this day people getting upset. And granted, he did go to Georgia, but I mean, shoot, if you had a guy like Frank go to another SEC school or go elsewhere, I don't know. I don't think it takes that long. I think it's like you said. I think it's more of a I don't want to call it a knee jerk reaction, but I feel like people are just upset that they feel like this has been lingering a little bit longer than they would have liked. I've shared my personal opinion. I feel like South Carolina should have waited at least one more year, see what would have happened with Gigi. That would have been fun, at least from a coverage standpoint, from a buzz standpoint, from an excitement standpoint. But at the same time, too, you can't dictate your program just on one player. You have to make what you feel is the best decision for the program. And the administration decided that it was time. And, I just look at it. I mean, I don't know what you think, Colin. Do you think this will be something that lingers on long, or is this something that will kind of go away probably sooner rather than later? And people will say, yeah, you know what Frank was able to accomplish here, there's some pretty good stuff, though, when it was at a high.
Yeah, I think you can approach Frank Martin's tenure with nuance and understand that it was a different age of college basketball when he was doing it, but he built a program that should have gone to the Final Four, and I think year four not Final Four, should have gone to the tournament in year 4 for him, won 25 games and got snubbed. That obviously did the following year and went to the Final Four, and just never from a wins standpoint kept pace. I think that there can be some nuance to that. I think you can understand that he did some good, much like Spurrier did some good in football, and then never really was able to capitalize on that as afterwards once you hit your peak, which South Carolina did with that Final Four. But they won a lot of SEC games. They were competitive. Frank Martin made them a national name just because he was here. So I think fans will soon realize that as the next tenure goes on and understand how hard it is to get to the tournament in South Carolina. That you do need to be really good to get there. And can it happen? I absolutely think it can. You've seen that. I don't like comparing the men's and women's programs because they're two different styles of doing things, but you've seen football have success. You've seen women's basketball, obviously baseball, have had success. So I think that there's the path to do it consistently. But I think time will be a lot kinder to Frank Martin's tenure, given how consistent they were in the SEC, especially of late, than what it was.
And if you're just joining us again, rehashing everything that took place today with Frank Martin, no longer the head basketball coach of the University of South Carolina. If you're just joining us, maybe after a long work day and you're getting caught up on some of this was something that, as Colin and I mentioned, not a surprise. And if it was going to happen, it was going to happen either today or tomorrow, from that 24 to 48 hour window after not making the NIT. And, one of the things that Colin and I were discussing, if you just joined us, we don't know how much it would have changed if South Carolina had made the NIT. If anything, it would just prolong it a little bit. Probably would have waited a little bit longer before that decision ultimately would have happened. But I don't know. I do think it's interesting, though, Colin, not to get everyone all riled up again, but, you see the situation of South Carolina not being able to make the NIT, and net playing a big part of that. You see a team like Vanderbilt make the NCAA tournament, a team that you beat twice, a team that you finished ahead of in the SEC. I mention that because it seems like, especially with college basketball, it's out of the obvious, which you still need to be able to win games. Style matters now. Style matters. Efficiency matters. Offensive efficiency, defensive efficiency. Tell me where I'm missing. Free throw percentage, and then
effective field. The I know everyone loves these Ken Palm numbers as much as I do. Um, Efficiency numbers, points per 100 possessions, is a big thing for the net, obviously. But to win games in this league or in the country, you need to be a good shooting team, effective field goal percentage. You need to not turn the ball over and force turnovers defensively. You need to rebound the ball on the offensive end, and you need to get to the free throw line and prevent teams from getting to the free throw line. South Carolina was top 50 essentially nationally in offensive rebound rate, top 50 nationally in forcing turnovers, 54th nationally in opponent effective field goal percentage. But they ranked the highest they ranked in everything else was 289. They were 289th in of offensive effective field goal percentage and near the bottom nationally, like within 30 points of the bottom nationally in offensive turnover rate and then defensive rebound rate and free throw rate defensively. So there was some good, but there was a lot of bad in there as well, which ultimately weighed them down.
Does that impact decisions these days? I mean, ultimately, we know it still comes down to being able to win games. We know that. But being able to have, and Frank, obviously more of a defensive-minded coach. It's not to say he doesn't know anything about offense, but, more defensive-minded, that's what he's known for. Does that play a factor in hiring that next head coach, that you're trying to find a guy that can be able to go out there and has a feel for the offense that, we see different teams, right? And Virginia might not be the best team to use right now because they made the NIT. But there's some teams like a Virginia that they're not worried about putting up, 70, 80 points. It's more so, okay, we're going to worry about defense. We are going to focus on every possession, and we're going to try to beat you out in a slugfest more than anything. We're not going to try to beat you in a track meet. Do you feel like there could be a shift from that now that you see how much net really matters, especially from an offensive standpoint? Obviously, every category matters, but it just seems like South Carolina, they got hurt by that this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think basketball's an offensive game. You look at the teams that are good. Defense is going to win a national title, to make Final Fours, you need to be good defensively. And South Carolina was, I think, third nationally in defensive efficiency when they made the Final Four. But you look at the number one seeds right now. Gonzaga was number one in offensive efficiency. Arizona was number 5 in offensive efficiency this year. Baylor was number 9 in offensive efficiency this year. And then Kansas was number 6 in offensive. So you're talking about the 4 best teams in the eyes of the committee were top 10 in offensive efficiency this year. They were all 4 really good defensively too. But you need to be a good offensive team to win games. That doesn't mean putting up 90 points a game, but can you avoid turnovers? Can you get second chance points? Can you get to the free throw line? And for Frank Martin's case, he just couldn't put together enough good offensive teams, especially late in the year, compared to the league and the nation as a whole. And that ultimately is what couldn't get South Carolina over the hump.
When you look back at the Frank Martin tenure, I mean, I got down here in 2016, so my very first year was the Final Four year. I mean, we've talked about it before. I mean, I remember being at Village Idiot, getting covered in beer, or being at the water fountain when everyone was coming out down in 5 Points, running over to the fountain, jumping into it, to what took place in Phoenix, despite losing, playing in front of the crowd that they did inside of a football stadium in Glendale. I mean, there's memories that so many people will have of the Frank Martin era that are positive. I mean, obviously the last couple of years to some, maybe, okay, you're ready for a change. It's okay. But it's just like, it's kind of like a relationship, right? You could still go back and enjoy some of the good. That doesn't mean everything sucks. I mean, that's not the case. There were some good times here. What are some of the ones that just stand out to you about the Frank Martin era that excites you, knowing that it shows promise that something good can be here outside of the obvious, which was going to a Final Four?
I think it was, they had the league's player of the year, first one in South Carolina history, player of the year, defensive player of the year, um, 2 sixth men of the year. I think I don't think they ever had a freshman of the year, but 5 all freshman selections, a couple all league selections. So you put together, you brought talent in early in your tenure for the most part. You turned out pros, and I think the Final Four is one. I think the shot against Kentucky with Jermaine Couisnard was a really good one that fans won't like talking about. And this is a program that had a lot of good moments against, under Frank Martin. I think that that's important to realize too, that yes, it ultimately didn't work out in the end, and that you understand that things never got really over the hump after the Final Four year because of some of those early season losses, because of some of those struggles. But you had two of the best seasons win-wise in program history that should have been 2 tournament berths. Instead, it's just 1. But there was some good in there that you just were never able to get over the hump afterwards. And I think the BB gun incident really set them back because of that.
And for those of you that don't know about the BB incident, that happened shortly after the Final Four year, correct?
That was during the NIT season.
That's what I meant. Okay, sorry about that.
So right before the Final Four, and you dismiss a bunch of those guys, and then you're forced to kind of reach and take some transfers just to fill out a roster the year after. Obviously, the Final Four, and you were just never tried to get on solid footing, and you just never were able to get over the hump. And I think that really set them back. It forced them to hit the reset button a little bit, and that was the issue that South Carolina really faced there with the BB gun incident. And I mean, we are where we are right now because of it.
Yeah, I misspoke there. Sorry about that. Thinking in my head, but I said something different. This is interesting, from Peyton. I would get Don Staley involved on, who can help our men's basketball program. My thoughts on that, I don't entirely disagree, Peyton. I think that the difference obviously being, okay, women's basketball versus men's basketball. But I think being able to get her to be, I'm not saying it has to be on the committee, because obviously she's got a lot going on. And even once the season's over, I mean, right now, these next couple weeks of South Carolina women's basketball gets ready to go into NCAA tournament mode. This is going to be the time period that the men's program is going to be looking for the next head coach. I would say this, though. I would be interested if I'm someone part of the administration. I would be interested. I'm sure these conversations could have happened before the NCAA tournament. You asked Dawn, what do you think helped you be able to grow the brand here the way that you guys have? Now, obviously, winning plays a huge part of that. You could ask Shane Beamer. You get Shane Beamer involved. But I do think it would be valuable to have some other coaches, but especially it helps that with Dawn, since she plays basketball, she coaches basketball, but has played basketball at the collegiate level and obviously at the professional level as well. What can make you take that next step? And we understand that women's basketball, and compared to men's basketball, to be able to do what South Carolina did, I mean, it was, I remember talking to Roscoe Wilson, Asia's dad, when Asia was going through the recruiting process, how the games for women's basketball would get bumped. There was a game that got bumped for a concert, and they would play down the street at the Coliseum. They didn't play at Colonial Life Arena, and how you could basically sit anywhere you want. You could have sat courtside during her recruiting process just because it was just completely different. But she was able to build that up. So I think being able, I'm bringing up some of these comments that people are sending in, like Travis, being able to show like, hey, Dawn, we want to be able to get men's basketball to be successful here. Is there anything that you could recommend? Doesn't hurt, but I don't know how much stock you really put into all that. I mean, at this point, Colin, how much? I'm not saying you don't value what Dawn's saying, but at the same time, too, it's just like, all right, she's got to worry about her stuff right now. And do you at least have that conversation with Dawn?
I'm sure Dawn, if she wants to give her input, Dawn's going to give her input. She'll answer when asked. But at the end of the day, it's up to Ray Tanner. It's up to Chance Miller. It's up to the entirety of the administration to figure it out and understand what they want in a coach. And I'm sure they will ask Dawn Staley for her advice and how it helps to win. But, I feel like it's comparing apples and oranges at times because Dawn Staley is such a transcendent person in the basketball world. Her experience is not going to be the same as some others. And she, what worked for her because she's Dawn Staley, and it's worked to perfection, might not work for somebody else because they're not the flag bearer for the U.S. Olympic team.
That's what Travis is trying to say right now. And Travis, I think we both agree with what you're saying. I think it's more so. It's not about Dawn being Dawn Staley. It's more so about the fact of being able to come in here, and obviously Dawn being Dawn plays a role of why they were able to turn things around, but being able to see, okay, what helped you? We've seen it with Shane Beamer. We've seen it with Dawn just getting involved and being more connected with the community. Does that necessarily
marketing is the biggest thing. Marketing. That's the biggest thing. I mean, you saw it with Dawn early in her tenure to now, and then obviously Shane's one of the best marketers and engaged in terms of engagement on Twitter in the country from a college football standpoint. So that's what I think that's something you desperately need if you're looking at South Carolina, someone who wants to market the program and needs to do that moving forward.
So let's circle back. And if you have any last minute comments, send them on in. Probably going to wrap this up in the next couple minutes. But as Colin and I were talking about before, if you're just joining us, kind of rehashing everything that has took place today with South Carolina deciding after 10 seasons to move on from Frank Martin as their head coach. Colin doesn't believe that this decision was going to be made. I mean, point being is if South Carolina made it the NIT, this isn't what, ultimately broke the camel's back. Could have helped Frank, possibly, depending on how far they went. But it seems like the writing was on the wall. And then just how things ended in that SEC tournament, how ugly and how things just got away from USC. And trying to figure out how quickly they're gonna attack this, because every university, every administration will always say the national search is underway. We're going to do this as quickly as possible. And I believe South Carolina when they say that, but we also know, that these things can drag on sometimes. They also can be very quick. You never know. It makes you wonder sometimes too. And I'm not saying this is the case for USC, but how much stuff has been going on behind the scenes, depending on how quickly a hire is made. So these are things that we're going to have to look at the next couple weeks. But yeah, Colin, I mean, look, bottom line is this. This is a day that for Gamecock fans, depending on, regardless of your thoughts on Frank, it shows that USC wants to be able to make some type of progress in men's basketball. I still feel, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, I still feel that bringing Frank back for that one extra year and seeing how things would have played out would have been interesting, just from a talking point standpoint, to see how a guy like Gigi, if he did commit to South Carolina, what that could have led to. But it's very likely now that we will never see that, because it doesn't seem like it is likely now that Gigi commits to South Carolina. And if he does, well, that would be a shocker. And, man, you're really looking good at that point. But it depends who you bring in, though, as a coach.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like you're at a crossroads right now. You've had some success. Obviously, Frank Martin came in this program, I think is safe to say, was a dumpster fire. Darren Horn did not do the best job here. Frank Martin came in and built it slowly, and the tournament success wasn't there after the Final Four. But I mean, when you're looking at it, like South Carolina won. I mean, let's look. South Carolina won. Then the years following the Final Four, they went 7-11, but then they went 11 wins, 10 wins. Obviously, the 4-win year, and then 9 wins. You had some success in the league, and now the administration and a lot of people agree with it, say that's not good enough if you're not getting to the tournament. So you're at a crossroads, and South Carolina is ready to make the next step into a perennial, not to say that they're going to contend for the league titles every year, although they would like to. to be perennially in the tournament conversation. And that's the issue right now. And the next coach will go a long way in seeing if he can elevate the program. Because I think Frank Martin, it's safe to say, elevated the program. And now it's the question of, can you take the next step, which is the biggest issue, biggest thing for programs to do. And we'll see. I think that this program is at a crossroads right now.
And Colin, you and I had discussed a little bit earlier, but I'm just seeing some of the comments right now. I know Natasha was one of them that asked about GG. Adam mentioned about GG as well, so maybe they hopped on a little bit later in the program that we have here. But we'll kind of just rehash what we said earlier. I think that the challenging part is this: Frank's relationship with GG is well documented. It's known that one of the main factors that led to GG having such a desire to have South Carolina as one of his final 6 options. And I say options because they're not all schools right now. I think one of them.
Well, not just.
What's up?
You can say 6 options. I mean, the favorite to land GG Jackson. They were the favorite to land GG Jackson, and I think that.
Let me ask you this, and I'm sure someone's going to get offended by it, but I mean, screw it. I'm from up north. We offend everyone. Apparently, we got someone upset today on Twitter because we said James Reese. I hate that he ended his career like this. People get upset all the time, so why not get someone else more upset? Do you think it was a dumb move to move on from Frank right now, knowing that GG potentially could have committed to South Carolina? Or do you have to make that decision looking at it strictly from we can't let one player dictate the future of our program, despite basketball being one of those sports that 1 or 2 players can change things for a team?
Yeah, I don't know I'm not a fan personally of keeping a coach just for one player, just because that's a crapshoot.
Brenda's got her thoughts.
But if you kept Frank for one more year, it was the fact that he went from 6 wins to 18 wins, 17 against Division I competition. He went from 4 league wins to 9 league wins. That was what, on top of adding GG into the mix as well, I think is why the argument for keeping him. But at the end of the day, I mean, you had enough fans, I think, were ready to move on for the most part. I think an overwhelming majority of fans were. And I think the administration, given what happened last year and then obviously this year, I think that they were ready, and you saw what happened today. But if you're going to I'm not a fan of bringing a coach back just for one player. But South Carolina did. I think it made progress this year, going from 6 wins to 18. One of those being against Allen. They overachieved. I think it's incredibly fair to say they exceeded expectations, winning as much as they did after being picked to finish, I guess, 12th, 13th in the league, 14th by some. They were able to go out there and do that. And I think that's why you would keep Frank, along with the fact that next year's roster could include if you reclassified, no worse than a top 15 player in the country.
You know who's sitting the prettiest out of anyone right now on a day like today? It's Frank Martin. And I'm not even speaking because of a financial situation with being able to, have that buyout money. I'm speaking because he ends his tenure at South Carolina, and you can go back to everything you just said, Colin, which was this was a team that was projected to finish 12th, 13th in the conference, depending on what preseason rankings you were looking at. And they were able to finish tied for 5th. Did they make the NCAA tournament? No. Did they make the NIT? No. But you can go back and say, look where we were a year ago and look where we were able to go now. Because I know some people don't want to write off that COVID year. Fine, don't want to write it off. You got to look at it this way. Look what he was able to do last year and look what he was able to do this year. That shows that he's capable of making progress. Now, like I said before, like a relationship, sometimes, person's a good person, but it just doesn't work out. And the administration decided to go in a different direction. That's what happened in this case. But because of it, there's going to be consequences, just like there is anything in life. And we're going to find out. I mean, there could be some good consequences. There could be some bad consequences. One of the things, though, that you alluded to and that we've been talking about with GG Jackson looking on 3 right now. If you go to Gamecock Central and click on basketball recruiting, I'm not good with being able to share screens, and I'm still new to StreamYard, but 74.5% recruiting prediction machine had GG going to South Carolina. Duke was second with 16.5, North Carolina 8.7. I have a feeling those percentages are going to change.
Yeah, no, I can't see him going to South. Again, the talk around the industry, the talk around, GG, not himself, but was that he wanted to come to South Carolina. Yeah. Was that he would be able to, South Carolina felt like they were going to land him, and a lot of people around the industry felt like they were going to land him as well. So I don't see that happening anytime soon. Obviously, you never say never, because this is an incredibly stupid sport sometimes, but I can't see G.G. Jackson playing in a South Carolina uniform during his college career.
There's a comment that I want to look at real quick. And look, I've said this before. I'm not any PR. I'm not a PR representative for Frank. I'm just, I call it for how I see it. This is how I see it. This is how I feel. And I'm not saying that, at some point you don't move on from someone. Don't move on from Frank. I just didn't feel like he moved on from right now. But this comment, Jesus, Henry. Frank said he lost his desire to coach. COVID or not, Spurrier did this. I wasn't here during the Spurrier era, but comparing that to that, really? Frank went through COVID twice last year, man. This was something that impacted a lot of people. I don't think it's comparable by any means. And, the man, alopecia, lost his hair, doesn't look like himself when he looks in the mirror. I don't fault him. I give him credit for being honest with us. So that's how he felt. Yeah.
And he also said that this team reinvigorated him, that he was still a coach for a really long time. So while those thoughts might have been there after the end of the 2020-2021 season, they weren't there ending this season. And to the point where even I asked him after the SEC tournament if he would accept an NIT bid if offered. And he said, absolutely. He still wanted to coach this team. He really liked this group. And I think that that's something that's the part that I think is the hardest to like James Reese ended his career with a 22-point loss to Mississippi State. AJ Wilson, the same thing. And just not a good way to go out. I thought they deserved a shot at the NIT. I think a lot of people around college basketball were shocked that they didn't get one, but that just is what it is at this point. And, it's tough for them, and now South Carolina's going in a different direction, and we'll see where they go.
One thing I do want to ask you, though, before we end this, and this is kind of playing a game, and I hate, me, I don't like to do the hypotheticals, but it's tough not to at least look at it today. GG Jackson, if he ultimately does not commit to South Carolina, what does this next coach need to do to be able to bring that excitement back? Because, GG goes to North Carolina, DG goes to Duke, GG goes to Oak Hill. Maybe he doesn't reclassify. He goes up to Oak Hill and plays ball with his high school coach from Ridgeview, Yerk Stoneman, after just winning another championship with the Blazers. How can you be able to – because you know what's going to happen. You know what's going to happen. I think you know where I'm going with this. What needs to happen with this next head coach, and how quickly does he need to do it to be able to shush the what could have been birds? Because you know that's going to happen. GG Jackson doesn't come here. If things do not go well right off the jump, year 1, year 2, you know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
People are going to start losing their freaking minds. Some people.
Yeah. Win. End of the day. Win games. Just win. You got to bring in good players. You got to win basketball games. And
you see what Phil said?
Yeah. That's going to be the case right now, is that in whether it's next season or 2 seasons from now, I can't see GG Jackson playing at South Carolina, which means he's more than likely going to be at Duke or potentially in the G League. So you're going to be watching him play in a different uniform that's not South Carolina's, and which I don't think would have been the case if Frank was here. So I think that's going to be a tough pill to swallow. South Carolina's watching G.G. Jackson in the NCAA tournament with Duke and not South Carolina.
I'm trying to see this. One of the commenters said that our good friend Lou Bezak of the state newspaper had some quotes from Gigi. So I'm trying to pull those up here so we can read those in live time for it to kind of give you an idea of what Gigi is saying. I do know this, though, in the world we live in of following social media. I believe Gigi posted, I think he took it down pretty quick, though. He posted kind of like a sad emoji or something like that, or a broken heart. I think that's what it was, the broken heart. And then I think he deleted that tweet fairly quickly. I don't know if you can comment on a little bit about that, Colin. I know there's not too much to talk about, but I'm just trying to buy some time so I can find this post that that our one of our commenters had posted.
Yeah, he was really close with Frank. He was the reason why South Carolina was in the mix. The reason why South Carolina is even on the graphic, I think, is because of Frank Martin and that staff and Chuck Martin, who did a lot of the work there. So the family loves South Carolina's coaching staff, and without the coaching staff there, your odds plummet to get Gigi. And again, you were the odds-on favorite in the industry. You're the odds-on favorite in South Carolina's eyes to land him. And moving on from Frank cost you that. I'm not saying you should have kept him because of it. I'm not saying you should have fired him regardless. I'm just saying that's just the cold, hard truth right now, that more than likely, I'm not saying you ruined your chances, but it's going to be harder to overcome getting Gigi now that you've moved on from Frank Martin.
So looking at the story that Lou Bezak just posted this afternoon, having quotes from G.G. Jackson, I think most of these comments are from the weekend. So I don't know if there's any updated one, and I'm kind of skimming through it in real time, but you can go check it out at the state newspaper. Jackson told Lou, hopefully he gets to stay, meaning Frank Martin. He told him Saturday following Columbia versus PD's junior showcase in Florence, which, by the way, Jackson went off for, 31 points. He was named the MVP in that game. But, he said he was talking with his dad and his mom, who have been a big help during the recruiting process. Honestly, I don't know. This is a big decision. I don't want to rush it, Jackson said of the time frame. My dad has never told me anything wrong. So, the point being, I don't think there's anything new in terms of quotes. I appreciate you pointing that story out, though, because it also reiterates what we were kind of just talking about. It confirms, there was a broken heart emoji that was tweeted out from Jackson. He took it down. But the point being is this. I mean, there's no question the connection that Jackson and his family have with Frank. And Frank not being there, that will certainly play a big role. Now, if he does commit to South Carolina, then we'll have to wait and see. I know what you're saying. There was a post an hour ago. Yes, I'm looking at that post. Unless there's some quotes that I'm missing, I just skimmed through it real quick. A lot of it said, from Saturday. I mean, if there's something that I'm missing, let me know, because I'm trying to juggle this. Let's see. To me, it weighs a lot. I have known Coach Martin for a very long time, and what he spoke with. Okay, this weekend. Okay, that all I have is as of this weekend. If there's something new, I apologize that I don't have it in front of me. But point being is, I think it goes without saying that G.G. Jackson's relationship with Frank, one would think, will play a big role with this. And I'll give you a shout out. I appreciate you giving us the heads up about that. Not sure if there's anything else you want to talk about, Colin. I mean, any of these guys that have already committed to South Carolina, does that play a role now with Frank leaving? Is that something you have to worry about? I mean, these are things that we'll probably dig into more over the next couple of days, but for the for the people that are listening, because it seems like we keep gaining some people here and there on this broadcast. I don't know if you have any closing thoughts about that.
Yeah, we're going to have to wait and see. They've obviously signed two guys, Zach Davis, Daniel Sanford. I've reached out to both of those guys for comment. I think Zach Davis is more locked in than anything else because of the in-state aspect of it. But we'll see with Bryce Lindsey. I have an update on the Insiders Forum now with Bryce. Texted with him right before the show began. So we'll see. Recruiting's about to get insane over the next couple of weeks as we got to figure some things out with the new coach and just all the other stuff that goes along with it with the portal.
Gonna pop some of these up because I'm assuming some people are hopping on just right now and missing some of our majority of our show. Big Red, you can go to GamecockCentral.com. We have a good layout of some of the coaches that South Carolina could be potentially looking at. What I can tell you is that list will grow over the next couple of days. We will continue to keep you updated with everything that we're able to gather as we learn more information about, obviously, a story that took place this afternoon. This news took place this afternoon, but it wasn't something that was super surprising. It was something that I could tell you from a media standpoint, we were kind of expecting if it was going to happen, it was going to happen going back to last night over the next 24, 48 hours. And of course, it took less than 24 hours getting to just Monday afternoon, but we will have it on Gamecock Central. Stuff like this, what should we expect? That's going to be a question for not just a guy like Devin Carter. This is going to be questions for every player. And that's the fear that you have to worry about when you do move on from a coach. I mean, that's just the reality of it. This is something that what you're getting yourself into. It happens in other sports, but basketball especially now in the transfer portal world that we live in. Look, Devin Carter, a lot of fun. Can you blame him if he doesn't want to stick around? I'm sorry. I mean, it's just the reality of it. He might not want to play for a new coach or a new coach here. He might want to go out and pick his coach, essentially. So, I mean, would you agree with that, Colin? Not just Devin Carter, but any player that's on the roster right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think there are guys that we're going to transfer out regardless of who the head coach is, just because that's typical of college basketball. But now you're at risk of losing some of the guys that came here because of Frank, with the upper level guys on the roster, guys that played a lot of minutes for you. So that'll be interesting to track over the next few days as guys ultimately make decisions and seeing what happens with the roster as it goes into flux, which happens whenever there's a coaching change.
I'll show this and then we'll get it going. I would expect Frank to put something out there. I mean, you got to realize Frank was here for a decade. And as disappointing as I'm sure he's feeling right now and as hurt as he's feeling, maybe he feels betrayed by some people, maybe the fan base, not all. Okay. I want to say that because there's been plenty of comments here that have been pro Frank, and even some of the people that maybe wanted Frank to move on, they still have a special place in their heart for Frank. But I'm sure he's hurt, and you can understand that. I expect him to put something out there. I know some people are still upset that Will didn't. Hey, it is what it is. Will wasn't the first coach not to write something or pen a letter to fans. He certainly won't be the last. But I would expect Frank to put something out there. But I know some fans are still upset about that with Will. So that's something that we'll keep an eye on. But yeah, Colin, any final thoughts before we kind of sign off here?
I think that's it, man. I'm gonna go get a cup of coffee and get back to work.
Yeah, it's been a very busy day. And if you haven't already, like I said before, go check out GamecockCentral.com. Colin's been doing a tremendous job of digging in, and he's been doing this over the last couple of weeks, just being prepared if South Carolina were to get to this point. And, of course, they have. So, unfortunately, if you're just hopping on and joining us right now, you can go back. You can go on YouTube and be able to watch. Just go to Gamecock Central YouTube's page, Gamecock Central's YouTube page. I can't even speak, but it's been a long day, man. It has been a very long day, certainly. But if you want a change of pace, football starting tomorrow, spring balls tomorrow. We're going to have a Garnet Trust interview with Marshawn Lloyd up first thing in the morning. And in addition to that, talking about Marshawn Lloyd, on my podcast with Marcus Lattimore, the Believe in South Carolina, that was one of the big topics that Marcus shared, and that's actually for free right now on GamecockCentral.com. You can read that and listen to the whole podcast as well. Marcus's conversation he had with Marshawn Lloyd and just some of the intel of what he told him coming back from that ACL injury. So that's going to do it for this emergency show today. We hope you guys have a good Monday and a good rest of the week. But be sure to keep it locked into GamecockCentral.com all week long and over the next couple weeks as we try to keep you updated as to what South Carolina will decide to do moving forward with their men's basketball program.